Hello everyone and welcome to this coding challenge slash tutorial. Today I'm going to be integrating ChatGPT and the OpenAI API system into an After Effects or general Adobe extension. I've already done this a little bit before, not in a tutorial, but just to make sure that it's possible because there are some limitations, and it is totally possible. And today you're going to have the option to do basically whatever you want. You can connect to text generation and get help with your questions. You can generate images, you can convert text to speech, speech to text, all kinds of super useful stuff. We're gonna try and do it in less than an hour, so set the timer now for an hour and let's jump into it. And of course, down below, hit subscribe, the like button if you enjoy the video, leave a comment if you have any questions or requests, and check out the links in the description for products, help, and community. I have done a little bit of this before again, just to make sure that it was possible. A lot of times there are things like Node.js libraries that have huge issues integrating to an extension. But we're going to start off with the extension testing code, which you can check out on my GitHub on the front page or in the link in the description down below. And we will need a couple of things before we begin. One, of course, you need an OpenAI account. And two, you need to make sure you have some funds put into that account. Now, I've already generated my API key. I'm not going to show you all of my API keys, of course, but I have this one called dummy. And this dummy one I'm going to delete as soon as this tutorial is over, of course, so you can't use it yourself. But what you want to do is after you've created an account, you'll want to make sure you pay for it, and then that you go into the API keys and create a new secret key. What this is going to allow you to do is name it, create a secret key, and then copy down that code. I have that code already pasted in here. Again, it's going to be deleted. Don't worry about it. But this is just to explain to you how to get your key. You need to make sure, of course, you pay and have an account and have some funds loaded. Because every time we make a request, it's going to cost anywhere from like half a penny to, depending on what we do, a penny or a couple of pennies to do some processes. I myself loaded in $10 and have been making a bunch of requests and just to test out how things go. And we have a lot of options on how we can reduce the cost and try and balance the cost between the quality of the AI model we're using. And of course, I don't want to be too nitpicky, but it's technically machine learning. Is it AI? I don't know. It's not AGI, so should we call it AI? But now that we have that set up, an account with funds put into it, we can go into the documentation and choose what we're going to do. The first thing we probably want to do is dependent on what your product is going to be. Like with our extension here, we can hard code the API key in, or we can have the user put it in to make sure they're using their own API key. So if we wanted to, on the initialization of our extension here, what we could do is we have our base container here. We're going to create a text input. We can even just call it reg input. This is going to be equal to our document, and we're going to create an input. Our reg input .id is going to be reg input. Our reg input .type is going to be a text input. Honestly, we could probably just do a password, make it a little nicer. Reg input .value, we're going to set to be our actual API key here above. Then we're going to say document.get element by ID, our container. We're going to append our reg input. To make this a little bit better, I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to put all this in what I like to colloquially call myself a width E. This is just a width element that's a div, and it's going to contain some stuff. I always make my width E elements styles. I make them 100% width, so they fill up the entire window. And then I also always set the position to relative and the display to inline block. And what that basically does is allows us to put anything within it we want. I'm actually going to append this to the container rather than our reg inputs, and then we'll append reg input to our width E. The width E is just something I've always used. Set it to the whole width of the thing, and then anything contained in it will be nice and orderly. I'm also going to take our reg input, and I know I could just use CSS for this, but I'm trying to do everything right here in JS. So we're going to set the border to none. Just quick custom styling. We're going to set the outline to none. We're going to set the background color to something like that. Set the normal color to white. And width and height as well I want to modify. Just to make a quick little presentation so the user can put it in. And what the heck, we'll add a padding left as well of about 15 pixels. And now let's go ahead and load it. So you can see here we have our password. Gonna set this text align of this of all of our width E elements to center. And there we go. We also need a button to do it. So I'm gonna say var red button. Include document.create element. And say register login, we could technically just say. We'll do quick styling. I really do like to do a lot of my styles in JavaScript if I can, but I know if I have a bunch of classes, it's obviously easier to do it with the CSS itself. Then we'll take this with the that should be a good start. It's a huge button. So we need to set similar style and display values for these. And then with the button. There we go. It's super basic, not the prettiest thing. Maybe we can make this a bit bigger. That's gonna do for now. I'm kind of nitpicky when it comes to the styling of my buttons. So I'm gonna say red button, hover, cursor, pointer, just so we know it's a usable button. Now, when we click on login, we need to do something. So we'll say red button.add event listener. We'll add a click. And what are we gonna do on register click? We're going to, I guess, sort of just say login using our reg input.value. We'll create the login function as our code, you could call it API key. And we're just going to alert the API key, make sure we're all good when we're inside of here. Click on login, and there's our key. Perfect. Now we can really start getting to the fun stuff. We need to first just do like a test kind of thing. So if we go through here, it tells us all the kinds of stuff we can deal with. It offers example code in Python and Node.js, and I think also curls. You have the option of doing like libraries, but what I like to do is just like a straight up curl request. You can install OpenAI via npm or Node, but I found, at least for my personal preference, I prefer to do just like a normal HTTP request. So we can still use Node.js, but not install an external library. No extra Node modules, just the built-in ones. So let's change our quick start to Node.js. I don't actually want that. Let's pick a specific task. What do we want to do? Do we want to generate an image? Do we want to do text generation? Probably start with text generation. So I can do chat completions and change this to curl. And what I'm going to say is using OpenAI, ChatGPT, I'm going to say, please convert this to Node.js built in modules, HTTPS. I think that should be fine just to say that. So we need to include HTTPS, which is how we make a request. And then we're simply going to use like a data object and send that in. You can also do a lot of tests using something like Thunder Client, which, if you're familiar, allows you to just kind of run like Postman or many of the things that run post requests and get requests. So we'll wait till this is done here. This is all looking really good. I've done this before, so I know that's how it works. All right, let's go ahead and on login, we should just run this, right? Then we have our API key, so we're gonna throw our API key where it belongs here. You can see we're using the V1 chat completions, and we have all of this information here. It says we're using model GPT 3.5 Turbo. There's a whole list of other models we can use. Everything from GTP 3 to 4. There's a pretty extensive list, and some of them are more specific to certain tasks, and that's something to take into account. So let's take a look at what exactly we're doing here. We're looking at text generation, and we have a role, a user, a role, a system, user, assistant, user. Basically what we're doing is we're telling ChatGPT, you are a helpful assistant. So that's kind of the way you should talk to me in the direction we're going to take things. Then you can ask something like, who won the World Series in 2020? And then as an assistant, it's now, because you told it it's an assistant, it's now going to tell you the LA Dodgers won the World Series. And then you can continue to ask questions. So we're just going to start with something simple. We're going to say, who invented the chocolate chip cookie? And I'm just gonna do that. And now instead of console logs, because I'm not using CEF, we're going to change these to alerts. And on the end, we should get our response body. So let's just test this out. Log in, waiting. There we go. We have an object of some kind coming in, but we can't see really what it is. It's kind of hard to see. But just remember, when we're making these requests, if it goes through to the ChatGPT servers and if it's serving us a proper response, it is going to take some of your money in API usage. So if you're doing testing, always test with small things and cheaper things. Like if you wanted to do transcription, but you're transcribing a 5-minute video instead of like a 5-second video, that's going to run up your API bill really fast. So just make sure you're aware of that. I'm going to push the response body into, I need like a text field. So on login, I'm going to take our with E. It's going to be our only with E. So I'm say var with e.id is equal to with E. And then when we log in successfully, we're assuming we're going to take our with E. We're going to say with E dot remove child with E dot child node 0. And we know there are 2 child nodes within here, so we'll just run this twice, meaning that when we physically run this and log in, once we log in, it should just remove these 2 items. Then give us a response. We're going to create a new input. We call this our res input. We're not really going to probably be putting anything into it, but we just want to have this so that we can put some text inside of it. And then we're going to say, get our response body on our end. Basically, when we're done with our response, getting all the text, set that value equal to our response body. And now when we run this, successfully log in, it should now be displayed here. So now we can put this into something easier to view. We have an object here that ChatGPT is physically returning to us. It has the ID, the object, it's a chat completion, when it was created, the model we used, and the choices and the content within those. If you want to be super specific as well with like how expensive these processes are, you can check out the usage tokens and it will tell you basically how much it cost in terms of the tokens. But you can see, if we kind of just browse here, you can see we have some content after assistant that says, the chocolate chip cookie was invented by Ruth Graves Wakefield in 1938. She owned the toll house in Whitman, Massachusetts, and created the cookie. When she added chopped up semi-sweet chocolate to her cookie dough, this ultimately led to the creation of the iconic Nestle Toll House chocolate chip cookie. So what just happened? We basically told ChatGPT, you're a helpful assistant. We could even tell it, you're a helpful assistant who specializes in baking. And then we could ask her, or ask ChatGPT, who invented the chocolate chip cookie? And maybe we want to continue the conversation. Maybe we want to be like, okay, well, now you're my assistant. We're providing like a mock chat history here. So we are telling ChatGPT, you're an assistant. We're asking ChatGPT a question. And maybe that's the response we pipe in here. And then we have one more user and be like, amazing. Now give me a great recipe in honor of Ruth Graves Wakefield. And based on this history, you're going to get different responses. Let's say you had a whole chat history of you providing code, getting changes made by ChatGPT, and telling it, hey, this didn't quite work, please modify this. This chat history will take all that into account and basically give the assistant context, more or less, to what you're wanting. So go ahead and run this and see what kind of different response we get. It says, we cannot parse your JSON body. Had this issue many times before. Let's review. I think this doesn't need a comma at the end. You can also just review the example code. Role user, role content. What if I change this? Can't be. Could not parse the JSON. Okay, first bug to figure out. What's wrong with this JSON? We have our message array, role system, specialist to baking. I'm gonna hit the chocolate chip cookie. Then it says that. I don't see the issue here. If I remove one line, cannot parse the body. Why does that work? So okay, so this doesn't work, but this works. Using the system we're implementing to fix our own problems, hopefully. When the request for your message works, but when it doesn't, it's just a problem that might be additional messages adding to the overall size of the request. But I have a thing saying data length here. I don't think it should be a constraint. Role assistant, role user, content. This is the specific error, and this is the full code. Just see if it does. I feel like it should totally work because you can do tons of characters now to the ChatGPT. Trailing commas after the very last message. Yeah, I removed that and it still doesn't work. Maybe this is correct. I don't think I have. Oh, I didn't think about that. Nestle has a E with an accent aigu. So, oh, wow. So accent marks might be an issue. You might have to modify that to get it correctly. Okay, so now we have our new response in the context of this longer thing. Check this out. Here's a classic chocolate chip cookie recipe in honor of Ruth Graves Wakefield. And you can see it's full of end lines and all that stuff here. So this is awesome. We're already getting a response. How do we extract the message exactly out of here? So that's pretty easy to do if you're familiar with JSON. And what we're going to do on end. Oh, wow. I really messed up that name, huh? Rare. What we're gonna do, we'll still put the text inside of here, but we're gonna say var response text is equal to json.parse. We're gonna parse our response body because I think it's coming in as a stringified, and then we're gonna grab whatever the message is. We need to go down to the message level. A useful thing if you don't want to just eye it and figure it out is we can Google like a JSON viewer online. Online JSON viewer. I had one that I used. There it is. And all you have to do is paste in your text and go to the viewer, and we can now navigate to the message. So there's our message. We need to go to the choices, and just for context, the choices is like when you generate multiple ChatGPT responses, sometimes you can like regenerate like this, and you can see now we have one of two. There's choice 1 and choice 2. We just want choice 1 for the most part. But you do have the option to check out the other choices if you do different generations. So I'm gonna move this back over here, go split screen. We're gonna grab the choices. Choice number 0 and choice number 1. And that puts us here. And then we're gonna get the message. Now let's go ahead and alert what that gives us. So alert response text. Today we're doing really bad at spelling things correctly, so bear with me. We should get an alert having whatever our response text part of the object is. You may want to add like a loading animation or something like that. That could be super useful. Took a little bit there. It's an object. That's not very helpful. We'll stringify it. We'll give it just a second to load. And here we go. We're not going to be able to see all of it, but now we see within this we have role, assistant, content, certainly. So if you wanted to check the specific role, we could be like, the role is response text dot role. And then we could say, if we want just the message, we'd say dot, is it content? Yeah, content. Now we'll log in and we should get a nice response. Let's see. The role is assistant, and here is our recipe. Awesome. So that's the basic way we can sort of set up a conversation and get that information back. Let's modify a little bit of the options when we're sending this request. There are some cool things we can do to give more random or more concrete answers every time, and things we can do to change things like the model that we use. And you can see if I go over here, we've only used a 10th, 100th, a 10,000th of a penny so far. So these text requests are super cheap. And if I now switch to say ChatGPT 4 though, they're going to be a bit more expensive. But just want to show you, like, while you're testing, you may want to have this usage panel open just to see how much you're spending. And that will give you an idea of how to modify things to make it more efficient or more quality for the users, and try and find that balance between cost and efficacy of the given model. All right, so a couple of the things I want to go over is, let's change the model, let's change the temperature if you're familiar with that, and let's change the response format. Let's first do response format. That's pretty cool, right? We can target specifically a JSON object. So to do this, we have our data here. Model is a property, messages is a property, and now response format is going to be a property. Type JSON object. So comma here, and let's see the difference when we do that. Instead of piping that, we want to pipe the message. So or sorry, the content, response text.content instead of the body. Try and run that. So now we should pipe in all the content into this text box here, but because we're using response format type JSON object, it should come back specifically in a JSON object. And this can be super useful. I've used it, for example, to try transcription. I would do a transcription of an audio file. It'd return it to me in SRT format, but I can use this JSON object to get it back in a different format, something that I know is going to be the same every time. Because occasionally ChatGPT can have variable responses, and that's something we want to avoid in some cases. I don't seem to be getting anything. I don't know if it's being slow or what, so I'm going to add a try catch and see if it gives me an error. Cannot read property of 0 undefined. Well, what does our response body look like? Invalid response format. JSON is not supported with this model. So always pay attention to your errors, add try catches and stuff like that. The particular model we're using, which is what? GPT 3.5 Turbo, does not appear to support it. But it looks like this one, Turbo 1106, might work. So if we go ahead and use that, let's try it. Login. Message must contain the word JSON in some form. Okay. So we need to say, now give me a great recipe in honor of Ruth Graves Wakefield in JSON format. Very strange that they specify that, but it's also good to know. So now it looks like we're getting past that section. We're specifying we want a JSON object. And what does our JSON recipe look like? We have a recipe with a name, a description, and instructions. So that's super cool. I love that we can get specifically JSON data back, because that makes like automation and getting solid responses back from the servers super possible. So now let's talk about temperature. So we have this parameter called temperature. Lower values for temperature represent a more consistent output. With higher values, they generate more diverse and creative results. So if you're looking for a very stagnant or cemented type of formatting, like JSON, and in a very specific way, based on certain wording you give it, maybe like, oh, I need these particular properties, don't just give me a random JSON, but use these properties only, then we want to set the temperature really low. But let's say we're doing something like, give me a creative list of names. I don't want the same list of creative names every time, so I'll set the temperature to be really high. Or if I'm generating random images, I don't want it to be the same every time necessarily. I may want really randomness and creativeness. So after response format, let's add a property called temperature. And we're going to set this to, I think we just give it a number, 0.2. We're going to set one at like 0.1 and then 0.2, like 9, and see what the difference is. I just want to make sure that formatting is correct. I guess we'll find out. So we're using the temperature of 0.1. We're probably going to get a pretty similar response to last time. You can see it's slightly different. This time it does not have a description that's the same. Interesting. So this is going to be a low temp. And now let's do a high temp at like 0.9. The range, of course, being from, I think, 0 to 1, or 0.1 to 0.9, or 0.1 to 1. You can see now we have objects for how much it makes, the ingredient, how much to use. So it gives us a very different response. Let's run it again at a high temperature and see how different the response might be. So we log in, and we got our response here. Let's see how different it is. You can see here, it's actually quite a bit different. Even just the formatting, well, this is incorrect formatting. The formatting is different, the objects are different, but if I go back to say my low temperature one, and we set the temperature back to 0.1, our response output should be very similar. I'm also going to remove this alert. Log in. So we have our low temp here. And in this case, we got a really bad response. Interesting. Let's try it again. It didn't even finish the response. Okay, that's interesting. Maybe it's too low of a temperature. What if I reintroduce this alert? Is it async and having an issue with that? Interesting. It seems to be getting stuck at 1 teaspoon. Not sure why that is. Maybe if we increase the temperature a little bit. Okay, there we go. Maybe the temperature was too low. So finding that balance is really important. If you want more creative random responses, use a higher temperature and test it a bunch to see how different they are. If it's too different and you want it to be closer, reduce the temperature, but not too low, because too low may just cause it to fail or give you like really, really boring answers. So we have the JSON output and the temperature, both super useful for getting specific answers and responses out of ChatGPT. There's so much more we can do. So what else should we do? Let's take a look at our usage again, because when we use different models, we have different usage metrics. Sometimes it's more expensive, sometimes it's cheaper. As you saw, our first couple of requests were 10,000ths of a penny, which means we could make thousands of them before we ever hit 1 penny, which is super great. But you can see here, we haven't used much except for, you can see how many tokens we've used in the API requests. In this case, we can see the turbo we used, but let's say we want to use GPT-4. Let's update this to just say GPT-4, not 5. And I think we can just plug that in like so. Cannot read property of 0 undefined. I think it doesn't support the JSON response. That's fine. We'll comment that out. And this is going to be a more expensive request because GPT-4 is obviously more advanced and is newer, so it's going to be a bit more spendy on your API. You can see it added something at the end here. Please note that the optional ingredient chopped walnuts can be omitted if you prefer. Enjoy your baking. And it actually has this area here trying to be enclosed in code. So whenever you see these 3 backticks, that's universal for there's code. And that's a good way to know where your code block starts if you can't get the JSON data. 3 tick marks on GitHub, in a markup file, in Discord, it's always going to indicate there's code between it. So you could totally do a search between this if you want and just extract the code, parse it, whatever. And it'll probably take a second, but we should see soon a separate section for GPT-4, which requires a different number of tokens and thus costs. You can see here that we have Turbo 1106 and Turbo 0613, which we've done separate requests through, and it shows us sort of the difference in cost for those. Now, that's sort of like the overall basics. Like once you know this, you can kind of get going on your own and figuring out all these other things, whether it's speech to text, text to speech, computer vision, all this kind of stuff. But we're going to do 1 or 2 more just to show that porting this to a different type of OpenAI environment is actually super easy using this template of using the HTTPS request and all of that. So why don't we do the fun part and do the image generation, right? This is using Dall-E, not necessarily, obviously, ChatGPT. Everything contained in this documentation is one of the various products or environments of OpenAI. And of course, this isn't sponsored, it's just really cool. So let's go ahead and do image generation. We can do this same code here. So what I'm going to do is, we have our login function. I'm going to do a image generation function. And we're going to run that instead of login. We're going to remove these children, and we need to create a image. We'll create an image element. I don't know if the outputs are always going to be this, but we'll do width and height of 512. Input, we're still going to want that in case we have to display some stuff. Image style position display with e.append child image, and we're going to add this after that. Now we have a different endpoint we need to access, which is this. So instead of v1 chat completions, we're going to do v1 images generations. We'll still use our API key here. And now the object we send is going to be a little bit different. So what we're going to do, let's see if we need to provide a model. It kind of looks like we do. So we'll say Dall-E 3. Then we'll paste these. I don't know if we can use temperature. We should definitely try. We'll comment it out for now. And N, I believe, is the number of images we generate. So obviously our prompt and size. Should be strings probably. Although we're stringifying it, I don't think it matters much. And we can probably save a bit of cost as well by doing a smaller image. And what do we want to generate? A 20 by 20 Rubik's Cube. Okay, and then it looks like this is how the response is going to be formatted. It's going to be a URL. So we'll say image.source is going to be equal to our response, which is going to be parsing our body there. Let's say alert the URL to make sure it's valid. Let's see if it works. I probably forgot something, but I think this might work out of the box. One more thing I can also do is we can just run this on a cannot read property data undefined. Yes. It's doing it before it loads the API key. So let's do that. Cannot read property data of undefined. I think it means this. Invalid size, not supported by this model. Okay, so models can be pretty picky. I guess it has to be bigger. Should not be complaining about that. Okay, it's being slow, which is a good sign. It's probably processing. Make sure we have this image. Cannot read property 0 of undefined. Okay, so we're getting a good response back, but I'm not seeing it anywhere. So I'm going to take our res input, set the value to the response body so we can see what exactly we're getting back. And hopefully that will help us. Okay, here's our data. It's revised our prompt for us. Interesting. So we can just pipe this into our JavaScript array or JavaScript JSON viewer again. Not working correctly. All right, so our data, it looks like this. We have a created date, we have data. It's doing too many data, that's why. It's interesting that it revised our prompt, however. Let's try it. I'm fairly confident this will work, and that assumes that our image is set up properly and everything as well. There we go. Check that out. That actually looks really good. Like, it doesn't look perfect. It looks like it's been jammed up, but like comparatively, that's a white cube, so that doesn't really work. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So yeah, as you can see, we can use it to generate images now. Let's check out our usage and see where we're at with all this. You can see we've already incurred 13 cents, maybe from that one image. That's a lot. This is actually the first time I've done image generation. It seems quite expensive, but I just want to show you that it is totally possible to do. Let's do one more. Let's do a Russian blue cat climbing the Eiffel Tower at night. The beautiful glowing city lights background. It could be that I'm using Dall-E 3 that it's so expensive, but I'm pretty sure Dall-E 3 is like way better. Okay, let's try that. We can also double check our usage, see if it's updated. I don't know how quickly it applies the updates, but you can see we still don't have like the view from we used the GPT-4, but it didn't cost anything yet, it seems. Let's check this. Whoa, Eiffel Tower is across from the Eiffel Tower. This is pretty cool, I gotta say. Like, just the ability to be able to do this. Yes, it costs money. Let's see how much it costs, but it's so cool to just be able to do it. I know it should be like a free and open thing. That one costs like 4 cents. So I think each one costs like 4 cents. And that probably also depends on a number of factors. With the release of Dall-E 3, the model now takes in the default prompt provided and automatically rewrites for safety reasons. So it doesn't want anything like inappropriate. So that's another disadvantage. If you do have specific prompts and for some reason it triggers their safety warnings, it's going to rewrite it no matter what. But if it's something that goes against safety or is something that isn't harmful in any way, but somehow is triggered or might be taken that way, there's lots of terms like certain types of bugs that can be blocked. This obviously may not be a best option for you. Ideally, everything would be a free and open environment, but sometimes just using like an API is fun to mess around with and quick to do. There's so much more you can do with this whole API. Not just for image generation, but for text to speech, speech to text. You can upload audio files and get the text directly back from that. You can do so much with this API. I've only begun to scratch the surface, and I've done like 3 or 4 of the different sections. You can even do crazy stuff like masking and fill it in with stuff automatically. All this stuff is super cool. Obviously, you have to have funds and a paid API account, but it's all worth it. You can see here, it was like a 3-cent charge for that one GPT-4 request. And for image models, we spent about 16 cents. So given that money it wouldn't be a huge issue, you can set this up at an enterprise level, get a better ChatGPT API account, and get everything going crazy. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will leave this code, I will upload as a special ChatGPT API connection. I'm obviously going to remove the API key as I mentioned. But you guys can check that out and try it out for yourself, set up your own account and start sending tons of requests, experimenting with the documentation and the different sections and products of OpenAI, and having a blast coming up with cool solutions, because you can do everything from text completion to answering questions to code generation to text to speech. You can do audio transcription and get the subtitle durations back. Use those subtitle durations to cut certain parts of your video and feed this into After Effects or Premiere and do tons of cool stuff. If you enjoyed the video, make sure again you hit the thumbs up button. This one was super fun to experiment with and make both a bit of a coding challenge and a prepared tutorial at the same time. Hope you guys enjoyed an insight into how I do things and how we can use ChatGPT to more quickly code as well as get these cool responses and information. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.